Hey everyone, this is the Figma website. I want everyone to understand what Figma actually is. So Figma is free. There are some paid plans and I'll get into that, but Figma is free. It allows you to create amazing UIs, it allows you to collaborate with your team really easily, and allows you to prototype and get feedback, and it's an easy handoff for developers. Let's jump right in so I can show you. So this is their website. Now, some of you may be using the web browser to log in, and you're going to sign up here and log in here. But, if you're really interested in using something like FigJam, which is one of the other Figma products, you can use FigJam here as well. It'll allow you to easily brainstorm. It's a really great tool. But one of the great things about Figma is the ability to just bring your ideas to life. Whether that's just creating, iterating, and repeating that whole process, Figma allows you to create some really beautiful designs. I think one of the other great things is the collaboration aspect. As you can see just in this little illustration over here, you have two people working together. You can see comments. It's great for getting feedback. If you're a design system nerd like myself, I know this may not make sense to some of you, but design systems are really powerful. They allow you to create components. They allow you to, use those components everywhere. And there are some different distinctions between how you can use components within Figma, and I'll get into that. But components are really powerful. It really is great to work with developers on how to use these components, what they look like, what their different states are. It's really great. And the last part is developers can easily come in here and understand what exactly makes up one of your designs. Whether it's like a UI element that they're clicking on, they want to know maybe position, they want to know like if there's like a border radius. They can get all this CSS from Figma as well. So Figma is a great tool that will allow you to work with your entire team, whether it's strategy, design, and even development. Another great thing about Figma is that they have a bunch of resources. I'm going to get into what is the community, but you can get files and templates, plugins and widgets. It's amazing. It'll really help speed up your workflow and share some of your designs even with the community. It's a really great place. Hey everyone, we're going to talk about pricing and just the plans in general that Figma offers. Now, Figma offers 3 different plans. Most of you are going to be totally fine in the free starter plan. Now, there are some limitations. Some of those limitations are that you can only use one project with 3 files. That's a bit limited, but some of you may not mind. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I would just try Figma out and then maybe move to professional if you want something that's a bit more expansive. Now, some of the things that you can do in the professional account is that you can use these components I was talking about earlier and use them across a bunch of different files. Now, if you do create components and you like using design systems or design libraries, you won't be able to use them outside of their local files if you're in a starter plan, which is limiting to some. Some won't care as much because they may not be using components a lot, but if you plan to, then the Figma Professional plan is going to be the plan for you. That is one of the biggest differences that I personally noticed from one plan to the other. So I would recommend start off with the free account, go from there. If you do like it, the professional account is way worth it. If you need the projects, if you need those files, if you need to be able to use design libraries across multiple projects and files. So just a heads up, that is the biggest difference. Now, one of the other things is you can come over here into the website where I'm currently at, and you can just see and compare them really easily. So I'm going to post this link as a resource for everyone who's interested. It's super, super helpful if you're looking to distinguish, line item by line item, what the differences are. When you do want to sign up, you're going to be able to come in here and just click sign up. You can use like a Google password or a Google account and do it like that. You can actually just sign up with your email, but you're going to sign up right through here, and it's going to ask you a bunch of questions about which plan you want to be a part of, etc. And you'll be pushed right into the actual website. Hey everyone, I want to talk about where you can get the Figma downloads. So I know many of you may have signed up already, some of you haven't, that's totally fine. So don't worry about that. Now you can sign up on the website and you can use the web browser as your way of using Figma, and that works perfectly fine because the actual desktop experience doesn't vary much. Some people just have a preference. I'm one of those people that use it both on my PC, I use it on my MacBook, and that's how I prefer to use Figma. I like that dedicated space without the noise of a browser, but if you want to use the browser, go right ahead. You don't need to really worry about the Figma download section here. Now you can access this on the website by just clicking on products, going down to downloads, and this is where it'll be. Now you can find the desktop app here for both Mac OS and Windows. You can also find the mobile app for Android and iOS. So the mobile app is really great if you're on the go, you want to take a look at design files, you want to answer some comments, you want to, take a look at a prototype. That's what the mobile app is really good at. If you want the desktop app for that, dedicated experience, this is where you're going to come. So I'll make these links easily available for everyone. Hey everyone, and welcome back. I wanted to go through the Figma UI and more specifically just the structure of the dashboard area over here. Now, where we currently are is where you're going to land when you first open Figma. Every single time. Now, you'll have a navigation bar up here. You can search, you can see your accounts that you have connected. You can connect more than one account, so it's really easy to switch. You can access the community as well. If you're working on multiple teams or if you shared a file that has comments on it, notifications will show up over here. If you want to access more things about your account, you can do that here. Even has a nice link to get the desktop app. You can add your account here if you have multiple accounts, like I mentioned before. You switch them on this side. So I do that really often. I have multiple accounts and I love switching between them, between my work and my personal. So that is the navigation bar. Then you have the sidebar. Now your sidebar is made up of a bunch of different things. You have your recents, where you're going to be accessing all the files that are available to you based off of what you recently opened. You have your drafts. Now these are where all your files are going to live. Now if you don't have a professional plan, majority of your files are going to live right here. And that's fine. I would just name them properly and find a convention that works for you to create a little bit of structure. Because if you do have a professional plan, you'll have the ability to add a bunch of projects and a bunch of files within those projects. Unfortunately, that's a bit limiting right now to the starter plan. A great thing about Figma, and I'll get back to this file I just opened, is you can have favorite files. So if I go back to my recents up here, you'll see that I've starred a couple of files, now 3 files, and they'll all show up here. So if you're working on a file or there's a file that you constantly refer to, that's a great way to just find it in one spot. All this functionality is also within the desktop app. Now these are the files, so you can click them like I did before and open up a new tab, or you can right click them and you can, see all the different options available to you. Whether you want to share it, you can copy a link, you can remove it from your favorites, you can duplicate it, etc. You can even start a new design file right from your drafts or your recents, or import a file, like some of the resources we have. So that is the easiest way to do that over here. And that is your Figma dashboard. Hey everyone, we're going to talk a bit more about files. Now files can be a little tricky to just understand quickly. I mean, maybe not so tricky. This is where you're going to do all your designing. But using the resources available in the course, is basically one of those things that are really going to help you be successful at the end of the course. So I'm going to talk about how to use those files and just how to access them. So you can see here, if you've accessed the link that was given to you by the course, this is what will happen. You'll be pushed right into this link and you'll see, oh, ask to edit. Don't click that. That's just not what you're going to do here. The easiest way to actually get here and get this file is to go and click this little arrow. We're going to duplicate that file. We're going to click the arrow and we're going to duplicate the file to our drafts. And just like that, a new tab is made, a new file is made, and if we go back, we can see that this is the new file. It's our recents. This is still one that is the original. This is my file that I'm sharing with everyone. And now you can use this file as well. So this layer is locked, I believe, but you can go ahead and move it around and start editing this actual file. So that's how you're going to duplicate files. If you've downloaded the resources, or if you have another file that you want to bring in here, you're going to click the import file. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the Figma file like that, bring it right in, and it has been imported. And we can click it, and it's going to open up that new tab. And here you'll be able to edit it as well. So that is how you bring in files. You can duplicate them, import them. If you want to create new design files, all you have to do is just click this new design file right here, this big button. So you click that, it's going to open up a new file, and it's going to bring you right inside. And here you can click whether you want to name it something. So I have my new design file, and now you are on the canvas. This is the canvas area. And that is how you basically use design files in Figma. Hey everyone, I want to talk about tools. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to create our new design file. So I'm going to click that button. It's going to pop open that new tab. I'm just going to call this one test for now. Now I'm going to show you a bit about Figma and all the different things you have going on over here. So over here we just have the tabs. So these give you like a quick overview of what you have open. You can have multiple tabs open. Up here is the toolbar. So let's start from the left. This is going to be your menu. And your menu is going to have a lot of different interesting things in here. You're going to be able to see quick actions. So if you like using quick actions, you can click that and say, I'm going to search for plugins. So I can go and search plugins in the community. Really great way to see what you have available to you. You can also see different types of settings for like your file, the ability to edit, view. I would say the majority of these you may not be touching. You may touch them once and then just leave it. I think one of the biggest things that is really helpful here is going into the help and account and going to keyboard shortcuts, which is going to pop open a shortcut tab right at the bottom based off of your system that you're using. It'll help you think about, well, how do I access something like, the pen tool, and, how do I make select all for MacBooks? For a Mac OS, it's going to be Command A versus Control A. So, you're going to be able to get all that information right within the app, which is super helpful. So I'm just going to close that right now. So that's the menu. This is where you're going to access your tools. So we have our basic tools up here. We have Move and your Scale tool. We have your Frame tool. Now I'm going to go into these a bit deeper later, but these are where you're going to get your Frame tool. Frames are where you're going to draw essentially your canvas. You're going to draw things on the frame. It's like the canvas or your artboard, whatever you would like to call it, but in Figma they're called frames. So we have our frame and slicing tool. Frame is probably the most important. Then we have our shapes, and this is where you can come in and make some great shapes if you're making logos, if you're just using shapes for just interest on your web page, or whether it's like a mobile app or something. This is where you'll come to use your shapes, and they have the shortcuts on the right. So you have your rectangle, you have your line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, star, and you can place your image here as well. This is your pen tool, which is really helpful if you're making custom shapes. I love the pen tool. We have the text tool. This is really helpful if you need to write something. Text tool is going to be your friend. So that's the text tool. And we have the hand tool for moving things around. Really helpful for moving around selections and not clicking into them. And then we have the comment tool. So one great thing Figma does is they have like this onboarding tutorial system. So when you sign in for the first time, they're going to run you through everything. You'll also see certain things for new tools and whatnot. So that is really helpful. So I'm just going to close that. So we have our comments. You can just leave a comment when you click on that tool. So I have a comment here. I'm going to just write, hey, great work. And then press enter, and that comment is stored. And you can move comments around. It's really great, and you can keep track of them over here. Then you have things like contextual tools. So let's say I have a rectangle. I'm going to make a copy of that rectangle using Command C. You can use Control C if you're on Windows, and then Command or Control V. And then I have that copy. So you can see that over here in the layers panel. So if I have, two different rectangles, I can see my contextual tools. So over here you have components. This is a little advanced, so I'm not going to really talk about components too much right now. We have masking. Masking essentially allows you to create shapes and hide different aspects of other shapes. So you can use the masking tool there. And we also have Boolean tools as well. So I'm going to actually select both of these. And you have these Boolean operations. So you can create a union, subtract. So if I'm going to do that, I'm just going to subtract, and it's taken a chunk out. So a lot of cool things up there in the contextual tools. Aside from that, you do have the file settings over here, whether you want to see the version history, you want to publish components, you want to rename it, you want to move it to a new project or another project, delete it or favorite the file. You can do that all within here. This is where you can access the project it was in. So ours was in drafts, and I clicked drafts. I'm going to go back. So that's what I clicked over there. And over here on the right side, you have some of your share and view settings. You'll see the different people that are in this file. When they're in here, there's little avatar bubbles. You'll be able to click the share button and get into all the nitty-gritty ways to share, whether that's with anyone with a link can view. This is how you're going to get your files. You're going to get them as viewable files, like I said. You can also just invite people manually. You can let them edit. And that is how you just grab the link. You could also play prototypes. So if I were to make a frame, I'm going to press F to make that frame. So if I have a little iPhone 13 mini, I'm going to just put that there and just drag one of my text layers on here, and I'm just gonna place that there for now. So this is just my design. I know it's great, and if I press play, it's gonna open up that prototyping tab for us, and you'll be able to see your prototype. You can link together prototypes and they'll show up there. So that is essentially how you would play a prototype. If you want to get into the zoom and view settings, you can do that here as well. You can customize what you see, and you can customize basically how you see it. You'll see all the shortcuts here for zooming in and out, and how to access some of these view options. And that is the toolbar. Hey everyone, I want to talk about now the left sidebar. So you'll see that I'm not in my test file anymore. This is what it looked like before. It was kind of a mess. So I think it's probably best that we look at a real file that, has a bit more structure to it so you can understand what the left sidebar looks like. So I'm just going to pop this out. And we are going to talk about this area, the left sidebar. So the left sidebar is where you're going to find layers, there's different types of layers here. You can find frames, there's groups, there's components. Right here, this is a frame, this is what a frame looks like. And this is an auto layout frame. These are this different types of shapes. So this is a line shape, which is a horizontal rule that's going right across. You can see it highlighted. You have groups, or different types of layers. So if I were to make this a component really quickly, that's what a component would look like, or a master component if I make a copy of it. That's what an instance of a master component would look like. So I'm just going to backpedal over here so we don't get too deep in the weeds there. But essentially, there's so many different types of layers. You can have shapes, images, GIFs. I mean, they'll all show up differently here just based off of their icon. And this is where you're going to find them. And you'll see some of them are even nested. So this is the header area. And within the header area, I have like the navigation for this design. And within the navigation, I have like the main navigation, which are these different options over here. And if I click this little arrow, I can see all those different options. And essentially, you can nest different types, and that's how Figma works. They allow you to nest frames within frames or shapes within groups. And it makes it really easy for you to understand and where things are and kind of take the approach like a developer as to how to structure some of your content, like within containers and so on. So that's how nesting works. And the easiest way to do that is I'm just going to take a rectangle. So I'm just going to click the rectangle tool. I'm going to take a rectangle, and over here we see my special rectangle. I can take that and put that within my header area. So you can just drag them into wherever you would like, and they will show up accordingly. So I'm just going to quickly delete that by pressing my delete key, or you can press your backspace key, and that is how you get rid of a layer. So you can easily right click on a layer and see all the different options you have for it. You can even do that over here if you'd like. You can right click on a certain layer and get those same options by doing that here. You can drag them, reorder them. You can even delete them by pressing backspace or delete the delete key while you're selecting them. So that's essentially it for how to kind of use them within this sidebar. But you can also double click, and I can name this to cool logo instead. So now that one's renamed. So really, really great here. That's just easy way to rename files. I love naming all the different aspects of my file, just so it's nice and clear for me to come back to it, even share it with others so they understand what they're looking at. When I see things that are frame 1204, it gets really messy. That's what it comes up as. And if you just make new copies, they mean nothing. They just mean frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, and it's really hard to follow that. So I'm just going to delete that really quickly. Okay, so that is how you rename layers, nest layers. You can also lock them, which I find really helpful. Sometimes you want to work on something and you don't want, in this instance, let's say we don't want to touch the navigation. So I'll right click over here. You can also see the little lock. You can hide it, but you can even lock it. So once you lock it, you can't really, oops, I'm going to lock the header. Yeah, you can't move the header anymore. So that's really great if you're working with layers that are over top one another. You can easily hide it too if you just don't want to see it at the moment, or lock it. So different options there. You can also do that by right clicking and going to the bottom. These are the shortcuts. Shift Command L on Mac OS and Shift Command H on Mac OS. And that is how you lock and unlock layers. There's also another aspect of this sidebar. So right now I showed you layers. Now there's assets. You can come in here and create components. So an example is if I take this logo, or this button's actually probably a way better example. So if I take this button and I'm just gonna drag a copy by holding Option on my Mac, but if I just take this button and turn it into a component, it shows up in my local components, and then I can drag them from there. And now I have a responsive button that I can use anywhere. And Figma will just throw that little tutorial up there, really helpful for us. But that is how you would use your assets panel. And you can use components from other libraries, other projects. Other people can just share libraries with you that they can control, but maybe you'd want the components in there to reuse. But this is a great way to use reusable components. Remember, if you're on a starter plan, you won't be able to use components that extensively. You will only be able to make components within your file like I just did and use them. So I can make this a component. Oops, I'm going to grab the logo here that we made, or that I made. We're going to make this later, but I'm going to grab this logo over here and I'm going to turn it into a component. And now that logo is there. So you can use your local components, but you won't be able to access components beyond that, unfortunately. And that is the assets panel. The last thing I did want to talk about though is the pages. So you'll go back to your layers and you can see over here, you're on the landing page. I'm on the landing page. You can see all the different types of pages here by just clicking this little drop down, and I can add a new page and it's going to create a new canvas for me over here. If I go back here, I have that canvas. If I go back here, I have my cover canvas. So you can move through all these different pages as you see fit, and you can create new pages. Remember, there is a limitation to the starter plan. I believe it's only 3 pages within a file, which isn't too bad, to be honest. Many people won't really exceed that, and some of these files already have a bunch of pages, and you'll be fine using those files because I've given them to you, but you won't be able to create new pages from that. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, and you can just delete pages, you can copy a link to a specific page, you can rename them in the same way you rename layers. You can do that all over here. And you can duplicate pages as well, like I just did. And that is the left sidebar. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Let's jump right in because we're going to talk about the right sidebar. Now the right sidebar is really where you're going to do a lot of your work. So let's jump right in. So I'm just going to click on this frame over here. I'm going to close this. So your frame is going to have, well, our frame over here that I'm, the landing page frame that's housing all of this content is going to have a bunch of different things on the side here. You'll notice that this is your alignment and distribution up here. So an example is I can take, say, these 3 things. I'm just moving really quickly here just for the sake of the demonstration, but I can take these 3 things and select them all, and then you can tidy them up by just, moving them to the top or making them all come to the middle. You can space them out separately by clicking this over here, so distribute horizontally the same way, and yeah, you can align them easily. So that's where you're going to get your alignment and distribution. You can also see your frame size, or just the size and orientation of your layer. So I have the X, the Y, that's where it's positioned. I also have the width of the frame. I have the height of the frame. I have the angle. You can turn things if you want. So I just threw a 90 over here. I'm just going to go back, Command Z or Control Z, depending on what system you're on. You can even set a border radius up here. So you can see that the border radius has smoothed that corner. And that is basically all for your frame size, your orientation. You have your position on the canvas, the X and Y values up here. You have your dimensions, which is the width and the height. Another interesting thing that I want to talk about is constraints. So we have, sometimes you'll have your just your resizing options over here. So this one's set to fill, and you can hug the content. You see how that kind of messes up the frame a bit? We'll get into this in much more detail, but this is where it's located. You can fix the height of this. So it's a set height. You can clip your content. So if I were to go like this, you can see that that content's not showing anymore because it's set to clip. So you can hide content beyond the frame. That's where all that is going to be. And Another interesting thing is your constraints. Well, actually, let's go back here. So if I select my hero frame, constraints are going to show up here because constraints can only show up within a regular frame. I'll get into that later. But this is what constraints look like. So left and right and top and bottom are for your vertical and your horizontal constraints. So if I move the landing page like this, it's going to shrink with it. If I move it like this, it's going to shrink with that as well. So those are your constraints. If you have an auto layout frame, these are where your auto layout details are going to be. So we'll get into that later as well. You have the ability to create layout grids if you're into creating grids. So you can create grids if you want. You have your layer properties, whether it's set to like pass through or darken, kind of like Photoshop a bit. And then the ability to set your fill. So if I press just that plus button, I can create new fills in here. I can also select this fill. It's turned off by default, but I can select it and, color it any which way I want. Now I can remove it. You have stroke. You can set a stroke. You see a stroke just showed up on the outside, which is like a border. So you have all your selection colors, you have effects, and in effects you can select like drop shadow, inner shadow. This is basically your bread and butter. You can even export your screen from here as well. As like PNG, you can do it as a PDF, SVG, and JPEG. So lots of options for you there. You'll notice that text has its own as well. So text has its own properties, and you can really dig deep into those properties. The other part of this tab, so you have design, now you have prototype. And prototype's really great, and this is how you would, create flows together. If I have two screens and I link them together in some way, like if I click on that screen, it goes to the next, I've created a prototype. And then I can access it by clicking plus. I can also see a bunch of different things. I can choose the interaction. So whether it's on click, or whether it's on hover, or while I'm pressing. And once I've chosen the interaction, I can, choose the destination. Where is it going to? So just one frame to the next. And then you can choose the animation. You can go move in. You can choose smart animate, and it'll give you some cool bouncy effects that you can use. So lots of cool things that you can play with over here. Another thing is you can define a lot of things like devices that you may see, whether it's like 11, 13 Pro, and you can customize that all here as well. So that's what you'll do, your prototyping stuff. Inspect is really great for developers to come in. So if I wanted to just jump right here and go to my button, whoops, zooming in. So if I'm going to go look at my button over here, I can easily see all the properties for that button. I can see its height, I can see its border radius, I can see the padding involved in that button, I can see all the actual CSS code spit out over here. This is where developers will really find it easy to find the elements that you've created and turn that design into code. And that is the right sidebar.